what's really interesting is that, you talk methodology there, and we of course absolutely agree that like Paul before the Athenians, you need to understand your audience. You need to find the in and communicate the gospel to them in a way that's relevant. Absolutely. But still, I'm struck by that kind of commitment. I'm trying to put myself in the position of like 30 students coming together and saying, we're going to do what it takes. Methodology aside, you had this burning desire to do that. And that's audacious.
Yeah,
and that's
true,
nothing to do, methodology aside, that is an audacious,
amazing.
awesome passion that really precedes method. Like the method was relevant for the time. Now that needs to change, all well and good. But methods want to make a difference if that initial passion isn't there. And sometimes I kind of feel like we hide behind methodology when it's the passion that's not there. Like if you really cared, you would really get to know. And if you really got to know, you'd know how to communicate. So how do we get back to that? How do we awaken that initial audacious passion to do whatever it takes? And you'll make mistakes, but you'll figure it out just like I'm sure you did, and people will get reached. That's, I think, what we need to get back to.
I think something that is always a great, super great reminder for me is to really to think about and meditate on your first meeting with Jesus. And in my case, I was a pot smoking high school kid, went off to Mankato State University there in Minnesota, and I met some believers, and I got in this little Bible study. I heard the gospel, and my life changed so dramatically in a very short amount of time. And that first love, being reminded of that first love and kind of trying to recapture and rekindle that big change that happened just even in the first days and weeks of becoming a believer, that's super motivating for me and super helpful for me. Not just because I want somebody else to have that same experience, but it just brings up in me the incredible love I have for Jesus by what he did in my life. So I think one big motivator has to be what Jesus has done in your own experience.
Yeah, that's good. I do think Ben's right, though, in the sense that, man, we sometimes, for the sake of being relevant and contextual, we lose the just bold passion. And maybe that's part of where this conversation started, right? Is that a lot of the pushback for quote unquote evangelism is because it's a reaction to when evangelism was done poorly or not relevant and contextual. But in doing so, we've actually, the burning desire and broken heart for the lost has been forgotten. And we have to go back to our first love and what Jesus did for us. And on an overflow for that, I see people. So I again, it's a personal conviction for me, because like you live in the Christian mission world and all about, cool, relevant strategies of reaching secular people, but you can become about that instead of a heart for the lost and wanting to see them reached. And man, what would happen even if they weren't totally culturally irrelevant? We had more college students that were like, I'm going to share the gospel. Our group is going to share the gospel with every student on campus. I think that would be incredible. Even if they're not doing it perfectly contextual, I think it would be incredible.
Well, I can tell you, people ask me what, drew me into ministry. And I say, well, I went to this seminary called Mankato State. And what I mean by that was the best education for me as a young believer was being in a group of people that really did care about sharing the gospel. And that really has, I would say, for my whole life, that's carried me. Just remembering those experiences I had and sharing the gospel over. And funny thing, it's almost like, let's say another thing about evangelism is the more you do it, the more you practice that muscle, the easier it is to flex that muscle and use that muscle again in the future. And I would just say, if I go through stretches where I'm not sure the God, I'm kind of in one of those stretches right now where I could say, I haven't really shared the gospel in a bold way for a while. You got to get out there and exercise that muscle because it's what keeps it healthy and keeps it, ready to fire when you need it.
Yeah.